Welcome everyone to our webinar. This is Alpega TMS's webinar about solving 2022's transportation challenges. My name is Carolyn Hunt. Thank you for joining us today. Please note that you are on mute currently, but we would love to have interaction with you. So please feel free to use that questions bar there that you'll find to the right of your screen. And we will address those questions throughout the webinar. And we have some dedicated time saved at the end for those questions that we didn't get to during the webinar itself. And of course, we will have a one-on-one follow-up with any specific questions you have for our team. So the webinar is being recorded, and we will share it with you afterwards so that in case you want to revisit something or share it with a colleague, you will have that link shortly after the webinar. So let's dive right in. I'm joined here today by Mike and Oswald. So Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon and welcome also from my side. I'm in the supply chain and transport world since the late 90s, and I got immediately addicted to it. So as you also can see at the background, so I'm a supply chain addict. And since the beginning, I'm passionate about supply chain technology especially. And happy to be part of today's discussion together with Oswald.
Great, thanks Mike and welcome. Oswald, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So hello everybody, and thank you for choosing our webinar. I have been working also for decades already in the transportation space, long time together with Mike. I think we have a long common history, and I'm really looking forward to discuss today some challenges we are facing in this field. Some background, together with my former employer, Gebrüder Weiss, I founded a cloud-based software company called Einet Logistics back in 2000. Which has now become a part of Alpega Group. I used to serve as a CEO for Einet, and now I'm serving as a member of the Alpega Supervisory Board, and as well as an advisor for Enapter, that's a producer of electrolyzer. And just by the way, I think that green hydrogen will get an important solution in the transportation space to reduce greenhouse gases in the future.
Awesome. Well, great. Thanks. And welcome to you both. So glad to have you joining me today to discuss the challenges. Just a quick mention about Alpega TMS. So we are a software solution, and our motto here on the screen, shaping transport collaboration through technology for a better world. I think that hits what Oswald was just saying about reducing carbon emissions, while tackling some of the major challenges that supply chain professionals face every day. So part of our job is bringing suppliers, customers, and shippers all closer together, sharing information and aligning on priorities so that we can tackle these problems together. And that's what we want to discuss today. So our webinar is related to, I want to put everything in context about why we're here today, why we're talking about these challenges. And then we've highlighted 5 challenges to focus on for 2022. And we're not going to leave you hanging. We also have some solutions in mind for how we can tackle these problems, these challenges, and conclusion toward the end with plenty of time for questions as well. So why we're here. If you're like me, you've been reading the news and you've seen supply chain in the headlines like never before. I think my friends and relatives didn't really know what supply chain was before 2020, and now it's everywhere. So it's a major topic in the major news sources, as well as just in our little supply chain bubble. And I think that's a major reason that we are in the spotlight as supply chain professionals and transportation logistics professionals. And we want to make sure that we're tackling the challenges that are thrown at us with the best possible solutions, best-in-class techniques. So that's why we're here today, is to discuss what are the biggest challenges, what are the ones we should be focusing our time and effort on, and how can we start to solve them. So I'd like to kick it off right now. So Oswald, can you tell us about this first challenge? I have 5 of them today. The first one is complex networks. Why is network complexity such a major issue today?
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I would say globalization has led to complex supply chains, integrating suppliers all over the world. And that means there is a need for reliable multi-leg and multi-mode transportation networks, and they have become a key factor for many companies. But as we know, incidents like the Suez Canal blockade can lead to major disruptions and creating tremendous costs and problems for the companies involved. And I would say understanding these possible disruption and expectation of disruptions in general can help us to find solutions to them. And therefore, Mike, I would like to ask you which possible solutions are out there in your mind. And maybe just an idea, maybe we should cooperate again much more with regional suppliers here in Europe and less on a global base, or maybe we get the right tools implemented to manage this complexity.
Yeah, it's a combination of several things from my point of view. So one big rock in front of us definitely is supply chain digitalization in general. But how to get there is the main question. So start with transparency definitely is a good advice. So create visibility for your up and downstream material flows and gain real-time visibility of your transports, for instance, by using RTV, real-time visibility solutions. But that's just one portion of it. Secondly, I'd like to mention simplify your network where useful. And we already today see quite a lot of customers moving from complex global networks back again to more regional structures, as you just mentioned, Oswald. Mm-hmm. But also really optimizing and restructuring the transport network itself, for instance, by implementing transport hubs and cross-dock concepts is definitely something that helps you to tackle complexity in the network. And the third point I'd like to mention is prepare for disruption and create resilient networks because it's quite sure. COVID, Brexit, Suez Canal, everything mentioned, but you also need to be prepared for the unexpected in the future. So that's something that is quite clear. And one essential enabler for resilience is collaboration in the supply chain. Digital ecosystems bring together suppliers, shippers, customers, logistics service providers, and carriers. And these ecosystems enable you to adjust your network much faster to the disruption and to new market conditions. And basically, it's also moving a little bit from a central command structure into a central orchestration model, which according to the Gartner analysts will be the model of the leading supply chain organizations until 2025 already.
Yeah, I like
that's
that
it.
I like that idea of orchestration rather than control. And maybe it doesn't eliminate the complexity, but it really helps to let everyone manage it in their own way and then bring it all together, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's basically the simple answer to the complex question.
Yes, it is a complex question. And another one that I wanted to bring up is this issue around talent. So that's our next challenge here. So Mike, maybe you can walk us through why is talent a challenge for 2022 in your mind?
Yeah, of course. So the term war for talents is a quite present term nowadays. And I would say, especially for supply chain, it is a hard fight even. So just looking into digitalization itself, if you follow the press, only in Germany, we are lacking around about 96,000 IT specialists already. And of course, a supply chain specialist is even harder to get because the perfect profile would be a supply chain professional with a super high IT competence in order to be best prepared for the digital supply chain of the future. But now I'm excited to hear from you, Oswald, how you think we can best overcome this challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I would say labor is a major resource and should be one of our focal points for sure. And I would add the shortage is mainly sure regarding skilled workers, as you mentioned, but also for reliable truck drivers and warehouse workers. So it's a problem, let's say, for different levels. And the challenge is not only to recruit the talents, it's also how to keep them in the longer term in the company today. So some thoughts concerning the resource of labor and how I see it developing. I would say, first of all, what we have to think about is that there is a well-known demographic change. Many experienced people will retire over the next decade, and there are not enough younger ones to fill the gap. The second big change or challenge is this technological change, what you mentioned. Everything will be much more digitalized, and this digitalization will enable to automate, and with automation we can get rid of boring jobs, boring tasks, and use this freed up time for more value creating processes in the future. And that will be a job enrichment for the logistics team, for example, and the team will like it because it's much more fun to create value than to do some repeating tasks every day. And what's also important, it will also attract new talent. To attract new talent, you have to prepare a good environment for the people. And that gives some sense for the people, and many people are really searching for sense in the work, in their job, not only for money. But now the question is which challenges we are able to tackle and how we can do it best. I would say the demographic change is nothing to really tackle on a company level. But the technological change is something to address for sure. And I would say, hence, it's absolutely essential to provide the logistics team modern and effective tools to master their challenges. And it is also crucial to educate the team and make them fit for the much digitalized business processes, as you said, Mike. And I'm very sure that will really be a good investment because the team will like it. You will get more efficient, and you will have a more stable and a better team.
Yeah, I like that the way to solve this challenge is by making work a bit more fun for people through technology. Yeah. That's a cool thing if we can achieve it. Great. Next, I want to talk about the challenge that we have around freight costs. So Oswald, can you walk us through why freight cost is a challenge now more than ever before?
Yeah, again, working for decades in the transportation space, we are used to fighting rising freight costs. That's not something new. But I would say nowadays they have increased to levels that pose some serious challenges for companies. There are many reasons for a strongly increasing freight spend. For example, at the moment, the incredible high ocean freight rates. And I would say with it becoming a bigger and bigger cost factor, we have to really address it and to tackle it. And Mike, again, I would like to ask you which possible solutions you see to manage and handle this rising freight cost in a systematic way.
Sure. I start with what is not a solution. Sit and wait will not be a proper solution because it is predicted that transportation costs will keep rising over the next years also. So um, really optimizing your transport network, but not only once a year, but on a regular basis or even in real time is definitely something you should have an eye on. Due to the high volatility and the disruptions of the current networks, it's essential that you more come from such a, I would say, steady state into a more agile transport network planning. So that's quite vital in order to keep your network up to date, and also much faster act on market changes. The second topic I'd like to mention is for long-term contracts, digitalize your tendering process. Use e-tendering platforms, and hereby you also should have an eye on built-in benchmarking capabilities to really ensure that you always get the best out of the market. And the third point I'd like to mention here is, of course, also how to tackle ad hoc transports. If you have the incident in front of you, you simply need to move it from A to B. Use spot sourcing. That's a smart way how you easily can access short-term ad hoc transports in a very efficient way. What we saw, for instance, during the pandemic, the spot sourcing requests in our system went up heavily. And as we learned, some of our customers could keep the production by that up and running. So that's the three topics, really: dynamic network optimization, e-tendering, and spot sourcing, I would say.
Yeah, there was a nice question that came in related to rising freight costs is how do we handle or how do we plan or factor into the network the growing challenge of demurrage costs? So the waiting time, ad hoc costs that we pay to those drivers who have spent time waiting at our facilities.
Yeah, that's a nice one. So that's definitely also something you can be prepared better with a proper solution around it. So what we see here is definitely smart dock management systems, but also yard management systems can help you to plan and execute in a much better way than without it. So by that, you really get down the demurrage costs. And that's, I would say, a benefit for both the carrier and the shipper.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard of some yards that were so crowded that the drivers were setting up barbecues and having picnics in the yard, waiting their turn to load or unload. But you don't want that because you end up paying lots of demurrage costs. So I think a dock solution may solve some of those issues. Super.
Yeah,
so sorry, go ahead. You were going to say, Mike?
No, all good.
Okay. Let's move on to our next challenge here around ESG. So, Mike, do you want to walk us through what is ESG and why should this matter as a challenge for us?
Sure. So that's one of my favorites because we in supply chain really can have a huge positive impact on it. ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is a quite new term. In our session today, we especially will focus on the E, the environmental part of it. And in the context of supply chain, of course, the greenhouse gas emissions are a relevant factor. As you may know, almost a quarter of Europeans' emissions are coming out of transportation. And besides this fluffy zero net targets and of course also regulatory pressure, as well as the commercial pressure is massively increasing, for instance, by carbon taxation. And I'm excited now, Oswald, what you think, how to best deal with these challenges in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Absolutely. I just learned it's a favorite topic for you. I like this, it's also a favorite topic for me.
Yeah, it's, by the way, also one of my whys. I like to work in that area. So.
Yeah, actually, a proper ESG will very soon be a must-have for companies. and especially since carbon tax is getting a reality. You know, it's not about just to be green, it's also about to pay a lot of money for the emissions. And as you mentioned, ESG is a quite wide-ranging topic, which will get addressed on a strategic level as well as on an operational level. And I would say today, my thoughts are more on the operational level to have some ideas how to tackle it. And as you also mentioned, the long-term goal for companies really seems to be to get net zero. And that means a massive reduction of greenhouse gases in all areas. And as always, there are different options to get there over time. I would say a first step, what we see out there is many companies will most probably compensate their emissions by funding carbon dioxide savings elsewhere, though the nice idea of planting trees or something else. But I think very soon the companies will have to really reduce the CO2 emissions, not just greenwash them. And in today's discussion, as you mentioned, we are focusing especially on transportation challenges. Hence, the question is, how can CO2 emissions get reduced over time? And let me share some possible approaches. So first of all, what I want to say is you have the CO2 emissions get measured accordingly, and you have to get a baseline for reducing it step by step afterwards. And as we know, you only can manage what you can measure and what you get measured. Then I would say a reduction of transportation in general is a good step. And again, I would say whenever possible, change a global supplier base to a more regional supplier base. And so you can reduce global transportation needs in general. And, you know, less transports means less emissions. But most important, I would say, is to reduce in your existing transport network, because to go for a regional supplier base, that will take more time. It's not done on a short notice. So on a short notice, you can look at your existing transportation network and you can reduce the empty miles you have and all the inefficiencies in the transportation network immediately. And I would say that's the best. And the really good news about ESG is the following one. A reduction of CO2 means also, or goes hand in hand with the reduction of freight costs, or vice versa.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing when you can reduce cost and reduce emissions all at the same time, right? Fantastic. Okay, I've got one last challenge to discuss with you both. So Oswald, can you talk to us a bit about carrier capacity and why this is an ongoing challenge for the logistics sector as a whole?
Yeah, I would say last but not least, a short discussion about this carrier capacity topic and challenge. I would say in volatile markets like we have it today, it's getting more and more challenging to secure carrier capacity with a good price-performance ratio. And there are several reasons for the carrier capacity shortages. A well-known one is the lack of drivers, as drivers are leaving the industry and searching for jobs that offer better pay or benefits and working conditions. But there are also several other reasons for this shortage of carrier capacity. I would like to mention, for sure, there always will be carrier capacity out in the market. But the question is how to find and how to secure the available capacity in a timely manner. And that's, Mike, something I would like to address to you. and ask you if you have some great ideas how to tackle it.
Let me start with a number. So today, still 25% of trucks in Europe are running empty. And in America, even 28%. So these two numbers already indicate the first part of the solution. So avoid unnecessary transport. So avoid unnecessary transports through a better transportation demand planning, and increase the utilization of the trucks by route optimization, but also by concepts like asset sharing, co-loading, which we really see get more and more important. And I'm convinced that this will be a standard in 2 to 3 years in order to really get out of this trap. And also here, nice upside, it's even lower freight costs. So that's one, avoid unnecessary transports and increase your utilization. And the second point I'd like to mention, transportation capacities will stay a scarce resource. And by that, the access to capacity is mission critical, I would say. What we already see today is that many shippers are using freight exchanges in order to really directly access the carriers already, instead of using service providers in between. So that's really how in the future the access to this freight capacity will change from my point of view. And of course, last but not least, supply chain technology will be an answer to a part of the challenge. In addition, concepts like autonomous trucks, drones, and so on will help to release this crunch between demand and capacity, but not today. That's more for the future, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great summary there, Mike. So thank you for that. So we're going to wrap it up with an overview of our 5 challenges that we went through today and the solutions. I've seen a lot of great questions come in through many of these, so we will share this afterwards. You can read through it in detail. But in complex networks, there are solutions around digitalizing supply chains, gaining real-time visibility, simplifying the network, and preparing for a disruption that might occur so that you're ready to face those challenges head on despite the complexity. In talent, we have increased automation to free up time for additional value creation and attracting supply chain talent with the right tools in place. Under freight costs, we have controlling rising freight costs through optimization, e-tendering solutions, and spot sourcing to get the best out of those volatile markets as they swing up and down. On ESG, we have measuring and then reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing those empty miles, and going hand in hand with cost reductions for a win-win there. And finally, in carrier capacity, we have avoiding transports that are unnecessary through transport and route planning. You'll see that theme throughout, and then accessing pre-qualified carriers via freight exchange. So with all of these challenges and solutions in mind, I want to talk a bit about the right tool to solve some of these challenges. So Mike, do you want to walk us through this slide? There's a lot on here, and I want to understand what do we really mean by the right tool?
Sure. So up front, also from my point of view, the right tooling definitely is a key success factor to foster supply chain digitalization. So what are the essentials for a future-proof TMS? Collaboration is the enabler for agile and resilient supply chains. And by that, the digital ecosystems play a very important role. So from my point of view, bringing together the suppliers, the customers, the freight forwarders, and the carriers in order to react faster into the demand and market changes is essential given for a TMS. Besides that, of course, besides this pre-onboarded ecosystems, it's quite important also to have the right tooling and automation in the system. So start with simplifying and optimizing your transport network. utilize strategic sourcing and benchmarking capabilities in order to get the best service to cost ratio for your transports under the given market conditions, and switch from this static planning once a year into a more agile dynamic planning approach in order to avoid transports in general and increase the utilization even in situations where demand is changing day by day. And of course, leveraging spot sourcing is quite vital for any disruptions you will face in the future, and create transparency via shipment execution by also utilizing real-time visibility vendors. Finally, of course, you should manage your freight costs, that's for sure, but also measure greenhouse gas emissions, which is quite close to the calculation of the cost in some areas. And finally, close the loop with advanced analytics and AI in order to gain insights and drive the right decisions. And even in a predictive mode by really using artificial intelligence based on the data you have. But that's just the tool, as you know. And there's a saying, a fool with a tool still is a fool. So that brings me back to a nice topic. It's supply chain talent as a key factor to succeed. And with that, I hand over back to you, Oswald.
Yeah, maybe we are discussing actually a very complex topic, complex supply chains and all that, tools and talents and all that. But I would say to have a short conclusion to what we were discussing. You know, first of all, hopefully there were some inspiring thoughts for you in our discussion, and you got some ideas how to tackle the transportation challenges. But we decided to have a slide or two slides to summarize it. And I would say takeaway could be that the humankind always was facing major challenges and they had to deal with. And it was in the old days, in the former days, different tools that we have. And if we look at the challenges of today, we need other tools. And it was and it is still crucial to get the right tools in place and the right team in place to be successful on the long run.
Yes.
Maybe you switch a slide more, yes. Caroline?
One more, there you go.
Yeah. And maybe that's a good point to take some questions and discuss what we just elaborated.
Yes, absolutely. I have a lot of great questions here from the audience. So the first one that I want to ask you here, I'll ask to Mike. Mike, can you give us an estimate of how much the efficiency increases when you use a technology like Alpega TMS? In other words, how much more can we expect with the same number of FTE? And this comes back to the talent question a bit and to the efficiency questions.
That's a nice one. So basically, of course, it's heavily depending on the as-is situation, but I'd like to mention one real customer example without mentioning the customer. So the customer had the challenge that the volumes increase 3 times within a period of 1 year due to a project coming up. And one of the essentials how they did that is that we had exactly this 1 year time to ramp up an organization and to implement a TMS and RPM system. So that's a quite, I would say, extreme example. That would mean you can handle three times the volumes with the same team. But of course, it's not just a tool question, but there is a lot of potential, I would say, in regards of efficiency based on on a situation where you have no tooling or Excel as a tool compared to a real automated and integrated TMS system.
Maybe I would like to add some thoughts about the costs. You know, if you really proactively manage and control your transportation network, you can save costs. We discussed the marriage waiting times, stuff like that, or you need some express transports to pick something up or to deliver something. And besides that, the efficiency is much higher and the team will like it much more to work with a proper tool. It's also, you can reduce costs in a really, we were always talking about roughly 20% with optimizing, planning, and controlling your freight bills and everything. I would say that's a number we can mention.
Yeah, maybe Oswald, to follow up on that question about optimization, there's a question here about how do you optimize your network regularly? Is there a way to really identify, for example, the ocean routes that will be significantly impacted, the outlook for the next 3 to 6 months by a certain challenge? How do we do that?
Yeah, actually, what we do is we take the information from the ERP system. So if you have some call-offs for your suppliers, we get it in an early stage, even if they are not finally clear and absolute. And we use this preliminary information from the ERP, let's say call-offs, to calculate the best possible way to transport it. And you end up with maybe some hubs, you consolidate something somewhere, and all the optimization and consolidation is always to reduce costs, but also to get the goods in time to where you need it. So I would say the most important approach is to do it in an early stage, not just wait until the goods are ready on the supplier's ramp, and then you start to calculate. We do it much earlier. And I would say, sure, there are some changes. So we have integrated suppliers, and we get aware if he will not be ready, for example, and he cannot deliver 100% or maybe a day later. And then we do an operational planning, a replanning again, based on this real-time data, what we get from the supplier side, for example.
Well, we're having an amazing number of questions come in, so I apologize in advance if we're not able to get to all of them today, but we will follow up. Maybe we should have just a question and answer session with Mike and Oswald one of these days. The next one is about talent. So the question is that talent is easy to find, but to nurture them accordingly is the most difficult task. As well, monetary things is also an issue, since most talent leave the field because of money. I don't think there should be some policy to maybe govern this. I mean, my experience in the past personally has been that people tend not to leave for money, but for other reasons. But maybe you guys have a different perspective. Mike, maybe you want to tackle this one?
Sure. So I think money is definitely one aspect. What I do not have with me is any policy how to tackle the money aspect. So I'm not too much into that, I would say, in supply chain organizations. But what Oswald mentioned before is basically two things I just want to rephrase a little bit. One is really giving the people and the supply chain specialists a good why, a reason why to be and work for a company is a good one. And the personal whys can be, and that's also, by the way, I think an analyst study, this why is positively influenced by everything around ESG. So people tend to really like to work in companies that focus on ESG and also especially on sustainability aspects. So that's one topic I'd like to mention. And the second one is again, it's a super exciting, complex environment, supply chain, and the combination of this complexity and the relevance, which is even pushed by media at the moment. We did not get so much attention the last years in supply chain than nowadays. This combination and working in such an environment together with the right tooling and technology, I think can really attract supply chain specialists and potentially also digital natives. So the younger generation of supply chain professionals.
Yeah, who are not going to be so comfortable sending out transport orders by fax anymore, I think.
Yeah. Hopefully not, yeah.
Okay, well, the next one relates to ESG as well. So how are we preparing or helping our clients prepare for new German supply chain legislation, which will regulate larger companies on their supply chain environmental and humanitarian performance? I think not only in Germany, but probably other countries as well are going to be facing this type of legislation. So I don't know, Oswald, do you want to tackle this one?
Yes, as I mentioned before, I would say many companies have really to address this topic, ESG, and they will come back for sure also to their suppliers and ask them, how can you help me to tackle this? And that means, as I said, I think a first step is always to get a clear picture, to get a baseline. That means measuring it, calculating your emissions you have today, and identify maybe some hotspots, you know, and maybe also identify some low-hanging fruits you can go for quite easily and get the emissions down. I would say measure the CO2 emissions and then try to find maybe, as I said, low-hanging fruits. That means optimize or reduce maybe empty mileage, stuff like that, what we mentioned with a proper system. And on the long run, in the transportation space, there's a huge topic that's, you know, fossil fuels has to be replaced by something else. And the something else is still a little bit unclear, let it put this way. Yeah, but to start and to help and prepare for what's coming up and this CO2 pricing and everything is to measure it and to be ready and to know what you are talking about in your company.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that Alpega absolutely is able to offer today. So something we help our customers with. Going back to those empty trucks that you mentioned earlier, that 20 to 28% figure, Mike, that you brought up. There was a question here digging into that a little bit more. Available. What's causing that? Is it really available to shippers, or do the carriers prefer to secure what they have and sometimes it's not matching to their schedule? What's the story behind that? Those empty trucks running on the road?
Yeah, that's a good one. So basically, I would say it's not available or not easily available to shippers, and that's exactly the core challenge. Depending on the transport concept, full truck, less truck loads, and so on, of course, the carriers are not able to utilize their trucks completely, because they are not allowed, even because they do not have a backfill. So it's really about how to create visibility, not just for one shipper or not just for the shipper that assigned the load, but also for others, or to the carrier who then best can utilize his truck. And this, I would say, collaboration and overview is still something most of the shipper TMSs, but also the carriers, are lacking. At the end, it's kind of I would say, a collaborative platform where these free capacities are traded at the end. So that's a kind of how freight exchanges like Alpega, for instance, also of course is hosting, can increase the overall utilization of trucks in a more
Yeah, and it's
general
not
way.
just trucks either, Mike. We had some maritime questions here too, and of course, ocean liners face the same, where they're not fully running full occupancy either. Yeah. Okay, there's a nice question here. Physical internal with autonomous trucks and physical internet, Internet of Things with autonomous trucks and right-sized transport containers might be the way forward. Does Alpega feel prepared for this new era? Are we ready? What do you think, Oswald?
Sure, we are. No, we had several discussions with companies, with truck suppliers, and there's a lot really going on. And the basic idea we have is what we do actually within Alpega is we combine TMS. So TMS is more the piece for the shippers to optimize, to control the transportation network with a freight exchange. And the freight exchange is more the piece for the carriers to get connected with the shipper. And what we did within Alpega is to connect the TMS piece with the freight exchange piece. But the next step will be not only to connect to the carrier, the next step will be for sure to connect to the truck. And the trucks are getting more and more prepared. Sure, if it's an autonomous driving truck in the future, there's nobody telling the driver where to go. Huh? So we have to do it directly from our collaborative platform and send this information to the truck. And that's not a story, that's truth. We are discussing with companies how that could work. And they are more and more even interested in companies like Alpega to solve the problem together. Because for an autonomous driving truck, it's hard to get the advice where to go, in an optimized way. So there's a need for something in between, and this something in between is for sure a TMS combined with a freight exchange.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe to bring this back to the present day and to our current reality, Mike, there's a question here about how often would you tender your core logistical flows? So how often do you want to tender?
Yeah, well, what really is a good frequency, that's, I think, a little bit depending on your situation and your network you're in. What we see is for core regions, for instance, that the typical frequency of tenders is an annual one. Whereas also long-term contracts sometimes are even 3 years, but an annual retendering of regions is something that plays typically in the favor of both the carrier side and the shipper side. Of course, simply from a process perspective or from a tooling perspective, it would be quite easy to shorten that down to a quarter. But without long-term commitments, it's getting quite volatile. So that's a little bit this, I would say, trade-off between long-term capacity in relation to absolute dynamic, and that's really depending on your business effectively. So if you are more on the manufacturing production side, I would say the tendency of tender frequencies is a little bit longer compared to a very volatile e-business. I would say here the tender cycles are much shorter.
Okay, that's great. And then going from tendering to sourcing, in more general terms, what's your view, Oswald, on localizing our sourcing? Is that something that companies should take already today, or wait and watch for another year to see if it goes back to normal? So like with no logistics challenge, maybe still good with sourcing across regions? What do you think?
No, I think that's something to tackle immediately. And we hear and see it in many discussions with customers that many companies are thinking about this relocation to Europe. And, you know, by the way, I have been living in Asia for 3 years, and I got a small impression how life is there and how is everything developing. And what we have seen, you know, the labor costs are rising heavily in China, and China is almost same price like East Europe. So the question is, why should I produce on the midterm in China? Maybe I can go back to East Europe, whatever. And these discussions are ongoing in many companies. So the clear answer is tackle it right now and not wait too long. Independent from a geopolitical aspect, what's going on between US and China and so on, and Russia, but just look more on the operational level, I would say, immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And it can take some time as well to find new partners and suppliers. All right, maybe another question here, Mike. So one of the serious problems in transportation visibility occurs at handoff points between modes, like a container terminal between deep sea marine and hinterland transportation, or rail terminal and pickup by road. How are we addressing that issue? Intermodal.
Yeah, so in general, I would say for our customers that are more into the higher maturity levels, meaning not sourcing door-to-door transports, but really split out the different legs of a transport, multi-leg, multi-mode transport. Here, the first step is already that you have all three providers if it is a three-leg transport. So you have three contracting parties, and those contracting parties you should motivate, I would say, to really provide you the proper status information. By that, you already gain some visibility. But of course, the handover points are still crucial. And what we see here is that some of our RTV solution partners are already integrating with port operators, for instance, in order to really not only get the ocean carrier, but also the port operations information out, and also are already into predicting it in some cases. So there is technology on its way, I would say, to also make this portion of the transport more visible.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think there's one final comment here from someone that I would like each of you to comment on, because it's a nice one to close on. Says that challenges like these frequently create volatility. And I consider that strong partnership is also important to get the best service. Freight rates are not the only parameter. So I really like this comment. I don't know, Oswald, if you want to comment on this as well or give your take.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I said, you know, the sourcing in China is based on poor cost perspective, you know. So where can I produce cheapest? And I think that's something that will go away. And I like this comment very much. It's much more thinking in partnerships and thinking not only on a cost level. You in any case you have to add to the cost the emissions. So you know all the let's say responsibility for the environment. That's something you have to consider, and more companies will consider it. So absolutely, I like this. Not only costs, but I would say still in a very good partnership. There is a room and a space to optimize together and to be more I say to be better all over together is also a fact to discuss very honestly about potentials on both sides and how to get it. And I would say yes, partnership, that's great, but let's also discuss all the possibilities and the chances we have together in a partnership to optimize the processes and get a good price. I will not say the lowest price, but get a good price and a good quality and a high, reliance in your supply chain.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts to add, Mike?
Yes. So I think basically this service to cost ratio is the right thing to measure, and I also believe in partnerships more than into simple sourcing carrier practices, I would say, and in order to make them sustainable and successful, you need to measure it on the one side, but you also need to challenge from both sides. So trust and challenge each other will bring you forward, and that's something I think that is really lived in several purchasing and transportation organizations we know.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, Oswald, it's been a real pleasure. And everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out. There is a contact form as you're leaving this webinar, so feel free to submit that contact form to get in touch with us directly. And I'll keep an eye out on your inbox for the invitation to our next webinar as well. So very nice meeting you all and hearing your wonderful questions. And thanks again, Oswald and Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.